Hello, everybody. We're going to get started in just about another minute. Just want to give time for people to connect this morning, but look forward to spending the next hour with you. We are broadcasting or streaming here in the greater Boston area where it's exceptionally cold this morning. I think with the wind chill, we're sub-zero or right around 0 degrees. So winter has arrived here in Boston.
Yeah.
Right. Great. So I'm showing 10:30. We're going to go ahead and get started right on time. Hello and welcome. My name is Rob Dietl. I'm a Senior Director of Partnership Programs here at MIT Sloan. Delighted to have you all with us from what's proving to be a very global audience. I think we have over 1,700 people registered to join us for today's webinar, which I think speaks to the importance of the topic, leading AI-powered transformation. A few housekeeping announcements. As you're getting settled in, we love to see where people are connecting from all over the world. So if you can just type very quickly in the chat box where you're connecting from, that will give us an indication of our truly global audience today. Really delighted to have you with us. We're going to record today's session, and you'll be sent a link to the recording as well, so you can review it later or share it with colleagues, hopefully. As I mentioned, a very important topic, leading AI-powered transformation. Over the next hour or so, we hope to talk about how the rules of leadership are changing. Today's middle and upper managers are facing a challenge of fast-moving technologies like generative AI, smart automation, and digital twins, and how they offer unprecedented opportunities to transform business. But simply investing in high-value technology projects is no longer enough. Success in this new area requires a fundamental shift in mindset and capability. You need to understand not just what these technologies can do, but how to lead differently. In a world where transformation is emergent, culture matters more than projects, and engaging your people is what makes it all work. We don't have a better expert here to join us today than George Westerman. It's really a pleasure to have George connect with us today. I've worked with George for several years here at MIT. He teaches in several of our executive education programs and has some additional teaching responsibilities as well. George is a senior lecturer here at the MIT Sloan School of Management and also as a principal research scientist. He's widely recognized as a pioneering researcher and thought leader in digital transformation, executive leadership, and technology strategy. Over more than 2 decades at MIT Sloan, George has authored 3 award-winning books, including Leading Digital, Turning Technology into Business Transformation. And he's also published influential articles in the Harvard Business Review and the MIT Sloan Management Review. George's current work focuses on helping organizations rethink workforce learning globally. He also serves as the co-chair of the MIT Sloan CIO Leadership Awards, advises the U.S. Library of Congress on digital strategy, and consults for senior management teams worldwide. Prior to academia, he spent over 13 years in product development and technology leadership roles, and he earned his doctorate from Harvard Business School. George, welcome, and looking forward to hearing your thoughts on AI-powered transformation.
Oh, I'm glad to be here, and thanks everybody for being here for the event.
So, George, George, maybe we can get started. I know over the next hour you want to talk about the 7 driving principles that define AI leadership. We may not have time for all of them, but would love to hear your thoughts on that, and also get some of your insight into key emerging technologies that create new transformation opportunities for organizations. Here at Sloan, we always try to help executives leave our programs or our webinars with some key takeaways, things that they can apply to their work. So, George, you're an expert in digital transformation for many, many years. Maybe you can start just by telling us on how AI is changing the game.
Well, what's really critical to remember in digital transformation is that the transformation is as important as the technology. In fact, if you've heard of Moore's law, right? Moore's law says these digital technologies are growing at an exponential rate. It's really hard to keep up with the pace of change, but luckily most of us can be a little behind the cutting edge and we're fine. But if that's Moore's law, that the technology grows in power at an exponential rate, there's another law that's really important too. And that's, I call it the first law of digital innovation. It's that technology changes quickly, but organizations change much more slowly. And that's something that we want to remember in the AI world also, that there are huge opportunities that we'll talk about with AI, but the transformation remains just as important as it ever has been. And the transformation is not, it in many ways is tougher, because where computers will typically do the kind of thing, do what you tell them to, people are a whole different story. They'll do what you persuade them to do, and what you keep persuading them to do over time. That's a more challenging thing in many organizations. So the number one thing to think about is this technology is really important. We'll talk about this technology, but you really want to be looking at how are we going to make the business better because it's here.
That's great. And George, I know you've talked a lot about kind of driving principles that exist. Can you go a little bit deeper into what those principles are and how those principles can help executives navigate this transformation?
So, one of the things that started happening in the digital world, this is 10, 15 years ago now, when we started our research, 15 years ago, when we started our digital research, and has just grown and grown over time, is that we need to think about these technology projects and opportunities differently from the way we did in the past. The idea of planning and executing a 5-year plan, it just doesn't work as well in this time when technologies are changing rapidly, when customer expectations are changing rapidly, and when the competitive market is changing so fast. And so what we need to do is we need to have a different way of thinking. We need to have a much more emergent process to find our way through this. But at the same time, you need to give enough steering where you're not just like a herd of cats running around. So what we found in our research is if you can think about some different elements in your own mindset as a leader, this can help you then as you try to figure out how to drive the organization and also steer what's happening. And I'd already talked about transformation, not technology, but this idea of the emergence is really critical. The idea that it doesn't matter how long you spend in your planning process, you cannot know what the world's going to look like in 3 years. And so what you want to do instead is have a more emergent process where you set a direction, you set a vision for where to go, and then you help the organization move its way in that right direction. That's organizations that are deeply, deeply into planning and control. That's kind of an unnatural act. Okay, so we're going to offer this much money, this many resources for this much time. What do I get in the end? And the answer is going to be, well, we hope we'll be in this direction, but we might be somewhere else. That feels really weird. But if you have the right discipline process, so you're going to make that's better than getting to the end of 9 months and figuring out where you were aiming here, but the world has actually gone there. So that's another big part, right? If it's transformation, not technology, another huge part here is just getting comfortable with this idea of directed emergence. And, we know how to do this, but people my age or anywhere near need to get comfortable with the fact that can happen.
So with that in mind, in terms of the importance of process and kind of the pressure of compressed timelines for transformation, what are you seeing from companies and executives in terms of feedback mechanisms where they can kind of continually assess how their transformation process is going and then respond by maybe refining the approach or pivoting if necessary?
Yeah, so what you said, Rob, is the answer, right? Can we get in a situation where everything we do has a clear goal in mind, and we have ways to figure out whether we're getting close to that goal? But instead of doing that in years or in quarters, can we do that in days or in weeks? So those of you who have been doing things with Agile inside your IT organizations, you understand what this is about. Unfortunately, many organizations, when they're doing Agile, it's just the IT people being Agile and the business people are not there. And it's really hard to be Agile because much of the time of developing these new innovations, new process changes in organizations, requires decisions and experiments in the business context. So if you're just leaving it up to the IT people, they just can't make it happen. So the short answer is carve up smaller projects so you can learn fast, maybe fail fast, but move quickly. And always make sure that every step you take, you have an idea what you're expecting to get, so then you can figure out whether you got it or not. That's really critical. The second thing I just want to add on what I just said, if you're just handing this off to your AI people or your technology people to do this, you're kind of asking them to fail. This has got to be a joint effort, because the outcome you're looking for is not a technology outcome, it's a business outcome. It's a change in the way you do business.
So, George, with that in mind, many leaders today are feeling pressure to just do something with AI, but they're not even sure where to start. What's the first question you believe every executive should be asking before adopting Gen AI or AI technologies?
So building on that idea of, it's the change, not the technology, you want to think about it the same way. That rather than saying, what are we doing with AI, or I need an AI project, start assuming that AI is useful just about anywhere you want to in the organization. Customer facing, supply chain, back office, data center, wherever it is. And instead, what you want to do is you want to look for problems. What problem do you want to solve? And then maybe Gen AI is part of the solution. So the question I'd ask is not what are we doing with AI? It would be, what problems do we want to solve? Now, how might AI be able to help that?
So that really speaks to having the established process and perhaps even slowing down, resisting a little bit of that pressure to just do something with AI and being more thoughtful. And as you mentioned earlier too, the smaller experiments, failing fast, are all keys to success for executives in deploying AI within their organization.
And I want to emphasize, this does not mean that you should not focus on AI. There's a lot you need to put in place to make AI work. You got to make sure the data is there, the technology is there. You got to make sure that your regulatory compliance is in place there, that you have the right policies, that you're growing the talent in the right way. These are all really important things to do with AI, and you might want to put somebody to focus on this kind of thing. But the goal would be to enable your company, not just to grow the AI. And if you do it with that view, then the AI will happen, because there's so many good opportunities there.
So the leader then has a responsibility to really frame how AI is being used within the organization. And with that in mind, how can leaders reframe their thinking to stay grounded in outcomes rather than tools?
Well, this is something that we talk about all the time, not only in the technology world, but in HR and many other places. If you set up a task or a job or a project so it is measurable, there's a chance you might actually be able to measure the outcome when you're there. But if you set up the goals to be something really amorphous and unmeasurable, you will never get there. So one of the things you can do as a leader is constantly be thinking about that. What does it mean to perform well in our organization? As we do a new change, as we do a new project or whatever, what dials do we expect to move? And then did we actually go back and move them? Well, so number one, think about outcomes all the time. Think about these performance measures all the time. But number two, once you're done with your effort, make the effort to go back and figure out whether you got what you expected. In companies, this idea of a post-action review, an after-action review, they call it in the military. It's a smart thing to do. But what do we do in businesses? We have given it a different name. We call it a post-mortem. And who wants to go to a post-mortem, right? Who died there? And that's not the point. The point is to say, hey, we did something. What can we learn, good or bad, from this effort? So number one, talk about it. Keep your people focused on performance and outcomes. But in addition, make sure every time you do something, you actually invest the time to have a good generative discussion on what went well, what didn't, and what you can learn from that process. By the way, one other thing to think about, if your technology group does this well already, then AI can link really well into that. If your technology group does not do this well already, AI can be a tremendous way to say, hey, everybody needs to get on the ball, not just our AI efforts. Because there's so much with AI that's cost so much, the risks are so high, it's even more important to do it the right way now.
So you mentioned risk, and that's something I think that all executives are grappling with. We hear that AI is universal. It's going to change everything. It's going to change every company, every industry, society writ large. And it's a very powerful tool, but it's also a risky tool. And when you look across industries today, where do you see the smartest and safest early applications?
So, we sat down about a year ago now to write an article on the giant transformations that are happening with generative AI. And the idea there was to say, these are kind of a lighthouse that will point your direction for every other company. And after talking to 24 well-run companies, we found, unfortunately, there's not a lot of that happening yet. There's a lot happening with generative AI, with the large language models, with the image and other kinds of generation, with the coding and the call centers. There's a lot happening, but not the big stuff that we expected to find. And it turns out that managers are being smarter than I was in that initial thought for the research. If you think about these big transformations, let's take the whole underwriting process for insurance, or let's think of the know your customer, or let's think of all medical patient interactions, and let's just turn those over to a computer. The computers will be better at it. Let's give our legal department to computers. If you think about that, huge risk. Signing contracts or missing things that can be millions of dollars, medical things that could lead somebody to get badly hurt. There was Air Canada tried a generative AI solution on their website, and it started selling tickets for basically no money. And they sued to get paid for the tickets, and basically the court said, you sold them, your agent sold it. So, So huge amounts of risk here, not only monetarily, but regulatory and other things. Also lots of capability you need to develop. That getting these things in place, there's what you can do for a small lab experiment, and there's what you can do at scale, and they're very different. So with that big run up, let me just say what good companies are doing. What we're finding is they're taking a 3-step process. Instead of thinking about the transformation with a capital T, in this Sloan Management Review article, we talk about small t transformation. If you think about a giant mountain with foothills going up it, the first foothill is just giving these tools to your people. Make sure the tools are safe, make sure there's clear policy for how to do it, and just say, go, have fun with this, innovate. Those of you who are doing things with co-pilots, those are the things that you're doing with your own internal versions of these LLMs. What you're doing there is, first of all, you're gaining some capability with the AI. You're starting to think about the policy standpoint, and your people are starting to gain a little bit of skill, not only on what to do with AI, but what else might be possible. From there, then they're moving on and they're taking on functions that are well managed, well controlled, and you can control the risk there. And on that second mountain, we're seeing 2 that are happening a lot, and then others specializing in companies. But number 1 is the coding, application development. These co-pilots work. Last number I saw, it was 39% more productive. People were 39% more productive. The question there is, of course, it's not a matter of using the tool. It's a matter of using the tool and changing the way you develop because you've got those tools. The other place that the companies are making real progress here is in their contact centers, their call centers. So whether the LLMs take over the initial round or 2 of conversation, or even better, whether the LLMs help to coach your people to be better at their job. These are also tremendously useful and well measurable opportunities. So if the first mountain was just find safe ways and that your people can innovate and they can report back. The second is, let's take certain functions and start to transform them in ways that we do it. And usually we keep a person in the loop still there. The third one, then, these big transformations, they're just starting to happen. We're seeing some software companies, for example, providing this functionality in what they do. But I think this year we're going to see more coming out with these agentic opportunities, these kinds of things. One insurance company I know right now basically has a committee of agents that review a life insurance application. And that committee of agents will vote on whether this person should get life insurance or not. And if the committee is very clearly yes or very clearly no, pretty much they accept it not at all, with no problem. If the committee's not certain, it says, we're not certain, but here's everything well structured for you so a human can make that decision. This has not been released yet, but it's going to come out soon. That's what the big transformations I expect to see over time.
So, George, I think you might have answered one of the questions that we just received from the audience. Dimitri asked, should organizations focus more on optimizing their tasks instead of deploying new functions? And it sounds like with the analogy of the mountains, it's maybe kind of striking a balance between both of those, that you're looking to do some, innovative new functions, but also looking at existing tasks that are maybe the low-hanging fruit that could be optimized more quickly, and kind of maybe not having a static answer to that, but where it's dynamic, where you're kind of being opportunistic where you can, but still experimenting with new functions. Does that sound right to you?
Well, so the danger, now I've been teaching for more than 20 years here and doing this in the world before that. When the danger of talking about innovation is if you talk about incremental innovation, somebody says, why aren't you talking about the big stuff? And if you talk about the big stuff, people say, but doesn't incremental innovation have a lot of value? Aren't you ignoring that? And actually, it's a fundamental kind of paradox we talk about. We talk about exploration and exploitation. Exploitation is getting better at what you're already doing. Exploration is trying new areas. And so I would never say, don't do the exploration. I would say that typically you think about innovation in horizons. You've got the near-term things, you've got the medium-term kind of adjacencies, and you have kind of the blue sky breakthroughs. And you want to allocate your time. And you allocate your time towards the first two, you allocate a little bit towards the last one. And I would think about the same way. You can think about new functions, kind of blue sky development, but there's an awful lot of opportunity and learning that has to happen that can be best happening in transforming what you're doing, in improving your existing processes. Why is that? Because your existing process, you already have something in place. You have something to measure against to see whether you're improving or not. You have the resources there. You kind of understand what the outcomes should be. So if you're in the process of learning how to do this technology, better to do it when you know the other things already. So I would never say, don't focus on some of the breakthroughs and some of the new stuff also, but I would say you want to make sure your bias is towards the improvement, especially while you're learning.
And is there a framework that you'd recommend for deploying Gen AI or artificial intelligence? Maybe something that's kind of a universal framework that would work, or is it more case by case?
Well, certainly, these frameworks are emerging. Our framework of these three hills, the small T innovation, the small T transformation, we can send you that article and you can look at that. We're doing some teaching on that now too. The major consulting firms, most of them have some pretty good frameworks for getting out there. And so choose your favorite framework. But what I would look at and say is if the framework is do everything at once, that's not the kind of framework you want. What you want is a framework that's going to have some of the technology side, some of the organizational side, and a built-in process to do learning while you are at it.
Great. And that question came in from Christian in the audience, but we do have another question from Solomon as well. Solomon asks, are you seeing increased creativity in the use of Gen AI tools, or is it strictly around efficiency improvements?
Absolute creativity. We have an article called about how generative AI can affect the knowledge work, because knowledge work was that thing that could not be automated until suddenly it is. And we talk about it in terms of three ways. This Harvard Business Review work, we talk about it, first of all, is taking away some of the routine cognitive stuff that you're doing. And that's that efficiency improvement. Number two is helping people to be cognitively better. For example, when I do writing, I think of myself as a pretty good writer, but I am terrible at titles. So what I'll do is now give my Gen AI tool, hey, here's what I wrote. Give me 5 sexy titles, right? Or here's what I wrote. How can I make this a little bit more interesting? It can help question bursts, creative thinking, helping you do more critical thinking, tremendously useful. And also, of course, what's happening in the art space is huge. I want to share one example, though, that I love about this. I'm writing a case study now on Dentsu Creative, which is one of the world's biggest to advertising companies. And you can imagine that the people who do advertising, do creative work, might feel a little bit threatened by these technologies. And so what they said was really interesting. They went through kind of hill number one. They said, you know what? Here are some tools. We've vetted these tools to be good. Here's the policy to work through. Use them wherever you want to work. And what we ask is that on a weekly basis, get together with your team and tell people what you're doing. And what's interesting is this bottom-up learning process has done two things. Number one, the creatives that were feeling threatened are feeling much more empowered now. They also, for example, nobody likes writing proposals, and it's just a much easier process when you got Gen AI. But in addition now, the technology folks and the AI folks are looking at these revealed innovations from the people. And when they see it 3 or 4 times, they say, we need that. And they're creating then the company's standard tool to do that process. And that becomes available. So you have the bottom-up process identifying potential innovations. You then have a top-down process standardizing those and making them available to the rest of the organization. And they're repeating this over and over again. And what's fascinating about it is now the boring stuff, no more budget spreadsheets. That just happens. No more proposals. Instead of spending weeks on it, it's much faster. It allows them to really focus on, well, what they said. It allows the creatives to be more creative. What's interesting, though, in terms of just efficiency, they're doing one more thing. They're not only just being faster and cheaper at what they're doing, they've changed the way they engage with their customers. Because it used to be, hey, customer, let's think about a creative campaign. We'll do a workshop. Now go away and come back in a week and we'll have an update for you. And now they say, okay, you like this, but you don't like that? Boom, 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 let's try a few things. It changes while they're in the room. So instead of a set of week-long learning cycles, they're now co-creating in the room together. That's better for the creatives. It's also better for the clients. So there we have an example of where, yes, they're doing the improvement, they're doing productivity, they're also becoming more creative, and they're also actually improving the whole way they work with their customers just by using these tools.
So George, Alexandra asks, what primary resistance are you seeing in organizations to adopting or engaging in AI transformations? Could be fear about job loss, concerns about privacy, worries about ethics or environment, or something else. What are the primary resistance areas that you're seeing in organizations today?
All of the above. And some of it depends on where you are in the organization. One I would add to that is concerns about accuracy. These hallucinations and other things. So from the top of the organization, there's a worry about cost, there's a worry about risk, inaccuracy, regulatory compliance, these kinds of things. Lower in the organization, the worries are, number one, will I lose my job? And number two, even if I don't lose my job, am I going to be able to adapt? And so you see a decision-making inertia at the top, and you see an adoption inertia farther on in the organization. And so some of the things I talked about earlier, and we can talk about them more too, is how do you think about both of those, right? How can we de-risk the investment and an investment decision at the top? And how can we make people more ready to adopt farther down in the organization? You need to think about both of those. And that's, by the way, one of the things I love about that case on Dentsu is that they've done both at the same time. It's also this 3-step framework we talked about. It helps to manage those in the same way.
It's wonderful to see so many questions coming in from the audience today. I'd encourage you to continue to submit. We hope to get to as many as we can in the time that we have. Another question from AJ. What can the decision quality makers in an organization look like in AI as challenges and opportunities?
I'm not quite sure what you mean decision quality makers, AJ. If you could kind of put it back into the chat. Rob, do you get a feeling for what that's about?
To me, it kind of would be like my interpretation would be it's an assessment in terms of trying to prioritize AI for challenges and opportunities. How do you make the decision between where the AI should be applied first and what might come later?
Yeah. So do it the same way you make all decisions, right? Where do we see a good return at a manageable risk and a manageable cost? and think about that as those are the natural things to invest in. Now, you will invest in some of the breakthrough stuff also, but your main focus is typically where do we see the opportunity at a reasonable risk? And so I would think the same way, right? Some organizations are making these decisions for AI separately from their other technology investments. We're seeing that at some banks, some other places. Other companies, and one I know pretty well is Cisco, which is the big food supply company, one of the world's biggest logistic networks in the world. They're just saying, AI investments are just like any other technology investment. Where's the business case? And we'll figure it out. So if you're thinking about how do we make quality decisions about investment, we know how to do that. We don't often do it well, but the same principles apply in the AI world. Now, there's another question that we could think about on there. What if we mean about accuracy questions? How do we think about when the computer gets it wrong? And what we're finding in the research and talking to companies out there, one good way to think about these agents or these AI models is think about them as digital teammates. And it's fascinating. In many cases, we're holding up AI to a standard of perfection that we would never hold up a person to. And second of all, we're expecting the AI models to be perfect when they start, when they have to learn and get comfortable with context and get better and better. And so if you can think about these AI models not as perfect, all-knowing gurus, and think about them more as a teammate, then you think about them differently. A new teammate is always going to need some training to bring them up to speed. Every human's going to need some kind of oversight and controls to make sure that they're being accurate and they're not violating our rules. The same kinds of oversight and the same concepts of oversight and supervision should apply in this AI world too. But let's not overstate the assumptions on whether things are going to be perfect or not.
So that's a great segue, George, into the area that I wanted to delve into next. And that's kind of more the human side within the organizations in terms of the impact on employees and the future of work for people. And your research on skills and career pathways is extensive. I'm wondering, how do you see AI changing the definition of a valuable employee over the next decade?
It's fascinating. Even as recently as 10 years ago, we'd say the best job you can do is get yourself trained on how to do coding. You will have a good job forever. And last year was the first year that I know of where companies hired fewer entry-level software engineers than they did the year before. Maybe except during recessions. And why is that? Because coding is now being augmented through these technologies also. I'd love to say, especially having two children that went through liberal arts school, to say what you need is the kind of critical thinking, creativity kinds of thinking that will get you through. I believe that to be true. It's not clear that will get you your first job. So what I would think about as you're trying to enter whatever you're doing, figure out a way that you can be good at it, and figure out a way to involve AI in making yourself good at it. That's for the entry. As you think about where to move, well, look at your job and try to break it into the tasks. What we're finding is the computers don't replace jobs, they replace tasks within jobs. One thing we know is if you are doing a routine job, if you're doing a job with routine tasks, those routine tasks will be automated over time. And we just got lucky that desk jobs weren't automatable all that much until recently. So if you think about your job, where are the routine tasks and how can you start to use AI to help yourself get better? And how can you think about what you might do when that routine task gets automated? Then focus on what do you love and what are you good at, so you can think about new opportunities that are coming along. You're not going to be able to fight this. There's a story out there. I don't know who said it, but a lot of people are saying it. You're not going to be replaced by AI. You're going to be replaced by somebody who uses AI better than you do. So take a look at your job. What's routine? Might as well use the AI tools to help you now, because eventually the AI tools will take those parts. And number two, what can you do that is beyond there? Connecting across the agents, helping to figure out where we're going, that are different from what the agents can do. This is not new. I've been working for 40 years now. And before AI, we had different technologies, we had different market changes. This kind of changes happens in jobs all the time. It's up to employees to be as proactive as you can. And just because I've been giving long answers, let me just give a longer answer on this one too. As organizations, we want to think about this problem also, that companies tend to be really good at helping their high potentials to grow. And they tend to be much less good at helping everybody else to grow. And one of the great things that's happening in this digital world, in this AI world, is it's getting more possible to give every employee the kind of attention and growth development opportunities that we give to our high potentials. We don't invest as much time into them. We don't do it in such an expensive way, but it's possible. We have some work in Sloan Management Review about how every company can help every employee develop in their career. And what's involved here? Help people understand the opportunities that are out there, especially the ones that are not straight up. So companies, I know several companies now that are saying, if you're in this job, here's where everybody has gone from that job before. And click here, you can talk to somebody who went to a different place. Well, how do you make those opportunities available? How do you help with the learning? Can you help people learn in smaller chunks than a whole semester of a class or whatever? And giving the rapid feedback and coaching. Showing what's possible, doing really agile learning and practice, and giving the good feedback and coaching. We used to only be able to do that to high potentials. And now it's possible to do that for anybody. And so if you're leading an organization, it's a good idea to start thinking about how to do that.
George, I think you hit on a really important note, and I know that you're very familiar with our approach here at MIT Sloan Executive Education. We offer open enrollment programs that run throughout the year, and we're now delivering those programs here on the MIT campus. We're delivering them live online. We're also have asynchronous where people can attend an online program and kind of take it at their own pace. And we're finding that it's important, like you said, to reach across the organization. So we may have a senior executive team or a group of 50 or 100, high potential executives come to MIT for a deep immersive learning experience, but we realize that alone isn't always enough to help organizations succeed in transformation. So we're scaling the frameworks and the contents throughout the organization, maybe using some of these online learning approaches to really make sure that there's a common language, a common vocabulary, that they're all working off of the same frameworks to achieve organizational transformation. And maybe you could speak to your experience, extensive experience teaching here at MIT Sloan, how you've seen that work in helping organizations transform.
It's fascinating that the whole portfolio process. When I first started at Sloan, we kind of had one way we taught, which was we lecture at you and you listen and maybe you do a few exercises in there. And over time, we learned that there's a much better way to do it. And so we had the open enrollment, we have the custom work that Rob, I know you do a lot of, and I do a lot of, where we focus an entire learning experience around exactly what a company needs. We also have these little sprints where what can you learn in 6 hours, right? Or 6 hours of material that you can come up to a little bit more comfort in that level. So what we're trying to do is adapt to get going there. What's fascinating also is how the teaching is changing. So certainly in the regular classroom, term papers are a different kind of thing now because the computers can write the term papers. And so we're thinking about how do you do assessment. But in the executive classroom also, very interesting. My favorite at the moment is teaching soft skills using computers. So we have one of our best classes is on negotiation, and everybody can learn from a negotiation class. But now you don't have to negotiate against other people in the room. You can actually negotiate against a computer. And they can turn the dial on the computer to say, tough negotiator, rational negotiator, negotiator who just wants to feel good about themselves. And you can try different negotiation styles against them. This was not possible before. And now it's becoming possible in other places. One of my students gave everything I've written to ChatGPT, and he created a George bot. And the George bot is tremendously good at saying the kinds of things I would say without me having to say them. So these kinds of things are emerging as really interesting opportunities to get there. One of the things that I'd like to look at is something I'm seeing in call centers now. That call centers now, the AIs can listen while you are talking, and they can whisper in your ear, that customer is getting frustrated, slow down, try to use some words like this. Or it can whisper in your ear, you've only talked about 2 of the product features, here's 2 other product features you really ought to talk about. Or it can look across 10 calls and it can say, you know, George, you're supposed to be selling, but you never actually try to close the sale. So the kinds of things where you've got a supervisor who can monitor certain calls, 1 or 2 calls a week from the people on their team. Now every call is not only being monitored, but coached for the people. And what's fascinating, a randomized trial here, in a situation like that, if the good employee, most productive employees were here, the new productive employees were here on productivity, everybody went to there. And it's fascinating. The question is, well, yeah, how do you improve productivity in call centers? Well, one way is just to yell a lot and make them work harder. What's happening here is they're more productive, but they're also happier. So productivity goes up, employee satisfaction goes up, and employee turnover goes down. Here's a tool where you're not just making them more productive, you're making them feel more supported. And there are opportunities all over the place to do that kind of thing.
A while back, you mentioned the importance of soft skills, and we have a question from the audience from Rohit. As organizations scale AI adoption, what is the single most critical non-technical skill that executive leaders must master to successfully navigate and lead the resulting organizational and cultural transformation? And how can they be practically measured?
Oh, I had an answer until you put the last bit of that question on there. So let me just talk about the important thing. More and more, it becomes the idea of setting direction and motivating your people along there from the leadership. It's helping to create the case for change and helping people feel that they can be part of that change. That's becoming even more critical in this time of rapid change. Measurement, I guess in that case, you'd have to measure it. After I just spent time saying you need outcomes in mind, what you'd want to think about here is measuring it. How well are you able to make these changes happen? I can imagine you could also measure this in terms of the communication. And are the messages resonating? Are people changing in their culture to get there? I'll come back to this AI-ready culture because I think it's worth talking about. For people lower in the organization, the really critical skill is growth mindset. Being comfortable with the idea that you have to gain new skills and you are capable of gaining those new skills and working to do it. In the technology world, it's just always been a part of the job. In many other parts of places that we felt we could have these skills and we could just stick with them. So at the top, creating the case for change, motivating people to move forward. Everywhere else in the organization, growth mindset that I can improve myself and I can also improve the kinds of things that my organization is doing.
Can we pivot for a minute, George, and talk a little bit about ethics and governance and what you're finding in research, organizations that are doing ethics and governance? It seems like it must be a rapidly emerging and iterating area for AI governance within organizations. What's your research indicating to you in terms of where that's being done well and what challenges executives might face in ethics and governance?
So once again, this is something organizations should have been doing for a long time, right? You've got ethics policies, you got follow-up to make sure the ethics. Unfortunately, too many times the ethics approach is, whoops, somebody did something bad, we're going to create a new rule. And yes, there's a question about whether AI is ethical or not ethical, but people are exactly the same way, the way you've got the incentives. So what we're seeing is companies setting up a real effort to understand what ethics they expect from their models and ensuring that there are ways to test those ethics as the models get put into place. Some of that is, the trolley problem that, do I turn here and these people get hurt? Do I turn and these people get hurt? But one of the big things you can do for ethics is just test for bias, right? Regardless of what you've put into the model, does the model act in a biased way or not? And how can we do that check? That's a huge piece of the ethics. Then, of course, the other ethics are, money versus people. Well, that's something you could have been thinking about in an organization already, and you want to make sure you've grown that. So bias is a huge piece of the ethics. There are other pieces of the ethics. And what I'm seeing organizations do is trying to put committees or processes in place to figure out, how do we think about ethics now that ethics is even getting more attention in this AI world. Once you've got that in place, you can then test the ethics as you start investing in a project. Is this something we should do? This is something we do in research all the time. There are certain kinds of research we should never do. Research with prisoners. Be really careful about research with children. Don't do research where people feel they're under duress. And so every time we start a research project, we have a human subjects committee that needs to approve the project before we can start it. AI ethics, you can think about it the same way. What are the ethics we care about? As we get started, how are we is this ethical, and how do we keep it ethical? And as it goes in, do we test whether it's being ethical or not?
So successful leaders then are hearing voices and getting input across the organization. It just doesn't rest, ethics and governance just doesn't rest at the C-suite. You're involving all different stakeholders across the business to share their concerns and insight and guidance in terms of ethics and governance. Is that correct?
Absolutely. A lot of this is from values. And once again, I want to come back to culture in a minute, but values become really important, how you talk about them and where you're going with them. But values plus following up to make sure those values are being followed.
Yep. Another question in from Dayanand, and I apologize if I'm getting any of the names, mispronouncing them, but with the rate of change in AI architecture platforms being higher than ever before, how do you find global organizations successfully managing this pace of change?
It's really tricky in global organizations. Every unit faces a different task environment. Everyone faces a different customer environment. And the resources you've got in different regions are different. Speeds are different in different parts of your companies. This idea of somehow getting control of a big global organization is really, really hard. And that's why management researchers have been talking about this for decades, if not centuries, on how you make this work. In a large organization, the complexity is both an opportunity and a challenge. I've talked about the challenge. Where's the opportunity? The opportunity is, given that every unit is different, every unit faces different situations, one of your units is going to want to be there faster than other ones are. And so one thing you can do is try to find those pioneers and work with them, or try to find what the pioneers have already done and learn from them. So you can take advantage of the diversity of a large organization to learn and then move those things more broadly. The other thing is, you need to have some policy in place from the beginning. This is what we're not going to do. These are the standards we're going to try to follow. And that way, as the rest of the organization does it, they at least have some clear guidelines to avoid waste, to manage risk. So from the top down, some standards, some guidelines without a lot of control. And from the bottom up, find the people that want to work with you, innovate with them, and then take that and move it. Just like we talked about in Dentsu at the employee level, you can do that at the corporate, at the business unit level also.
And George, staying at the macro global level, I'm sure there's divergence in terms of regulatory frameworks, and I think AI is very much being seen as a global race, that there's a lot of global competition. Are you seeing anything from your research in terms of areas where there are regions of the country or of the world that are moving more quickly? Is there a big gap, or companies kind of arbitraging different regulatory frameworks to kind of advance AI deployment within their organizations?
Certainly, when I've been traveling around the world, two that are seen as very much ahead are the US and China. And we're in the US, many of us. China is also doing some phenomenal things in this world, and you can argue about who's ahead and why they're ahead, but they are ahead. And then you got the rest of the world trying to figure out, how do we want to move? And so different parts of Asia considering, do we want to link with China? Do we want to be separate from China? Europe thinking, wow, we've got an awful lot of protections in place. Are those protections making us slower than we need to be and managing? I just got back from Spain, and the biggest question that kept coming up in Spain was, hey, how do we catch up with the US and Europe when we were talking about AI? So certainly different parts of the world are moving at different paces. You also want to think about different industries, right? The B2C industries are doing a lot of very visible stuff in their customer engagements, but the B2B businesses are doing really fascinating stuff in optimizing their processes. And so you're seeing in different sectors, different kinds of things being done.
So a question from the audience, when reskilling for AI, how much technical depth is truly needed for someone from a program or business background? What's the right balance between understanding concepts and being hands-on with tools?
It really depends on what role you're in. There's a lot of argument, by the way, within MIT and elsewhere about how much you need to know. Does everybody need to know how to program? Does everybody need to know how to develop these models? And different people are on different levels. And my take on it, now this is my take, this is not my colleagues who believe differently. My take is that if you need to know how to use the AI for the tasks that you do, and you need to have a general idea on what AI can do so you can make better decisions. So if you're running a company, you probably don't need to know how to develop models, but you do need to know what questions to ask as these models get developed on what's right or wrong. We have an article in Harvard Business Review, find the right AI for the problems that you're trying to solve. And it really focuses on those questions. So once again, there's no clear answer. You need to know enough about what AI can do so you can ask the right questions and think about the right applications. And if you're in a situation where you can use AI for your own tasks, figure out how to use it for your tasks. We have a lot of courses here in Sloan that run that whole gamut. From let's get you in and hands dirty and just you're going to just code up models. You're going to train models and you're going to code up things that connect the models over the course of a few days, and you're going to do really interesting stuff. And others are going to focus very much at the top. What can AI do? What does this mean for strategy? Or some things that we're developing here, myself and others. What does it mean for how you transform your company? What capabilities do you need to have in place? How do you run this thing forward? So you can kind of get anywhere on that spectrum here in Sloan. And I'd encourage you to look at what we have available.
I couldn't agree more, George. And I know firsthand experience that our portfolio has really grown over the past 1 or 2 years, adding offerings in AI from very short, focused engagements to much larger academy-style programs. So we really are hoping to have a solution for everybody in terms of closing that knowledge gap and actually learning some hands-on applicable skills that people can put to work right away. So something that I know is very important.
If I could interrupt for a second, Rob, there are a lot of courses here.
Yeah.
And so if you got a question about which one's right for you, please do not hesitate to send an email, either to the professor leading the course or to the team running AI, the exec ed. Send a question. Say, hey, I'm looking at these two. Which one is better for me? And we are always happy to answer that kind of a question.
Absolutely. Our registrar's office has a team of specialists that are we try to make the website as helpful as possible in terms of navigating the choices. We have reviews for programs that are available for people to read and see how other participants experience the program. But there's a tremendous amount of help that's available through the MIT Sloan Executive Education team. And we're always happy to help people identify the right program and make the right choice for them. If you had to identify one area of AI that organizations are underestimating right now, what would that be?
You're underestimating in two areas. One is underestimating the extent of what is possible with AI. What we're learning about that's possible now with generative AI is just the tip of the iceberg for what we can do with AI. The best solutions out there will not be a generative AI solution. What there'll be is a solution that has generative AI, traditional AI, regular technology, and human elements to it. And what we can see now by talking to ChatGPT is just nothing compared to what's going to be possible. So number one, underestimating is just how big the opportunity is going to be. The other thing we're underestimating currently, if that's looking towards the future, is just how hard it is to scale up from bench to scale. One of the executive we interviewed said, the problem is the low-hanging fruit, it's not really as low as we think it is.
Mm.
Because what we do on the bench in the lab, that's a well-behaved environment, and the world is not well-behaved. And so long-term, we're underestimating just how powerful this is for the transformations that are going to happen in companies and society. Short-term, we're underestimating the ease of implementation, and it's going to take more to get these things up to scale than we think it will.
So George, we're coming up. We still have time for a few more questions from the audience. If you'd like to submit any final questions, I'd encourage you to do so. But as we approach the close of the session here, George, I'd love to get your thoughts on how AI has changed what you do here at MIT, how you approach teaching, how you approach research. How are you using AI as for your research, for your teaching, for how you design programs and lead programs here at MIT?
The easy answer is I'm using AI for all my boring writing. I don't stare at blank pages very often anymore. I let it start and I build, and I've had to learn that, anyway, so I've had to learn that you don't have it do two versions, you have it do one version and you fix that. If you do two versions, you spend more time reconciling those two versions. So I don't look at blank pages anymore, but also I'm doing a lot of saying, I'm thinking about this idea, help me think through it, whether it's a research angle, and the kind of thing where I would normally do with a colleague, if I can find the right colleague with the right amount of time, I can do a lot more now, just thinking together possibilities with the AI. And then the last thing we're doing is we're thinking about how can AI help in the teaching. So thinking about some of these agents, the George bot and other things that can give a richer experience for everybody there, not only in the classroom, but after we leave the classroom. So they can continue with that kind of thing. What else? It's helping me make sense of my mailbox.
So efficiency
it's helping
tools.
to remind me, efficiency tools and those kinds of things. Yeah. Hey, Rob, I want to jump over. There was a question from Gisela about marketing, and I just want to mention, I've given you some examples, and there are many others, but since you asked specifically about marketing, it's fascinating stuff going on in managing advertising campaigns, especially the online advertising. The experimentation that's being possible, and even AI-driven hypothesis generation for your campaigns is now becoming possible. Amazon is doing that, and others. What Adobe and others allow possible to change the imagery for every campaign or every segment, make it much more easily. There's some really interesting work. We're just starting to do case studies on revenue growth management. And how do you figure out the growth engine here? Not the advertising, not the creative messaging, but improving the growth engine, the targeting, that kind of stuff. So as far as marketing, there are huge opportunities, and that's just marketing. If you think about operations, if you think about product design and others, these opportunities are all over the place.
George, that's great to call out marketing, and I think that speaks to the strengths here at the Sloan School too, that AI covers so many different domains, and we have faculty that work in all these domains. So we have expert faculty in marketing that are really looking at how AI is shaping that. We have programs that talk about marketing customer centricity, getting that friction right between AI and human interaction. Whether it's using AI as an innovation tool, systems thinking in AI, systematic innovation of products and processes. It's wonderful that we're drawing from such a wide bench here at the Sloan School of Management, but also tapping into resources across the MIT campus, colleagues from the Schwartzman College of Computing to get their technical expertise and kind of pulling that all together in a way that we think is always the most impactful learning experience for our participants. So I'm glad you called that out on marketing. We have just a few minutes left. George, anything that we didn't cover today that you want to talk about, or perhaps predicting the future for AI and what organizations will be grappling with in a year from now or 2 years from now? Any final thoughts?
One, predicting the future. We have some really amazing AI courses now, and Rob, you and I and the team, I'm developing some AI courses, so look for them in the near future on AI and transformation and some other things. And I'd love to see you in class when that happens. I'd love to see you also in classes with my colleagues. Don't wait for that. If you got something you want, we've got some tremendous stuff there. Looking towards the future, we have to balance hype with reality in the AI world. And I've been around long enough to think about other major trends that have come along, right? And one of the big ones was e-commerce. So back in the year 2000, I was doing my doctoral dissertation, and e-commerce was going to change the world. It was going to kill all the big companies. And then we had this period where we hit a drought, and everybody said, oh, that was stupid. E-commerce is not going to be nearly as much as we thought it was. And now e-commerce, we don't even think about it. It's just part of what we do. When you think about mobile was a cool thing that individuals used to just kind of use your phone. And now it's integral to all of our lives, social media, many others. And so the way I think about the future of AI is it's exciting now, it's scary now, it's risky now, it's highly hyped right now. And there will be a time when people say, boy, we were just so overblown on AI. But I would look beyond that. I would look beyond that valley and into where we're going to be in 5 or 10 years. I expect that AI is going to be part of just the language, the thinking that we have everywhere, and we need to be ready for that.
Great. Well, George, I'd like to thank you for taking an hour out of your busy schedule to be with us today. And I'd like to thank our audience, again, joining us from all over the world. I hope you've enjoyed today's session with Dr. George Westerman, and that you're taking away some helpful points and ideas and frameworks that you can apply immediately to the work that you're doing, whatever industry or organization you might be part of. And certainly welcome you to explore our program offerings that run throughout the year. It would be, as George mentioned, it would be our pleasure to have you in our classroom, whether it's here on the MIT campus in Cambridge, Massachusetts, or if it's online in a virtual classroom, much like what we're doing today. We really do design our programs to be interactive and engaging and impactful. So we'd like nothing more than to see you with us here in an MIT classroom to dive deeper on this issue and the many issues that executives are facing again. But for now, it's time for us to sign off, wishing you all the best. And please stay tuned for upcoming programs that we offer, like this LinkedIn Live webinar, and we'll hope to see you again soon. George, thank you again. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for being here.